Let's be honest, the balance jig is supposed to be a magic bullet for ice fishing. We've all seen the videos, we've all heard the stories. But for you, it feels more like a dud. It just doesn't produce. Today, we're going to figure out exactly why that lure works for the guy 50 feet away, but not for you. And I promise you, the answer is probably a lot simpler and a lot more surprising than you think. It has nothing to do with the expensive color you're using or the brand name on the package. By the end of this video, you'll understand the one invisible force that's killing your bite, and you'll know how to fix it for good. So let's start with a question to get the comments fired up. Do you believe there's a single magic cadence for a balance jig, or does it change every single day? Let me know what you think. The balance jig has a legendary reputation for a reason. For decades, it's been a go-to lure for putting walleye, perch, and pike on the ice. The problem is, its reputation creates a dangerous assumption. Anglers see it work, they buy the exact same lure, and they expect the exact same results. The common wisdom you hear on the ice is to just jig it up and down. So that's what people do. They rip it, they drop it, and they wait. When it doesn't work, they blame the lure's color or the size or maybe even the weather. They'll switch from a perch pattern to a fire tiger, convinced that's the key. But for years they've been focusing on the least important variables, completely ignoring the fundamental mechanics of what makes this lure so effective in the first place. We're here to break that cycle. First, let's address the core misunderstanding. Most anglers treat a balance jig like a vertical spoon or a teardrop jig. They think their job is to make the lure jump up and down directly below the hole. This is fundamentally wrong. A balance jig is not a vertical lure. It is a horizontal, gliding lure. Its entire design is based on the plastic fins on its tail. These fins are engineered to catch the water, forcing the lure to swim in a semicircle or a figure 8 pattern as it falls. Think of it less like a pogo stick and more like a paper airplane. Your job isn't to make it bounce, your job is to get it airborne so it can glide. Once you shift your mindset from jigging to gliding, every other piece of the puzzle starts to fall into place. You'll stop fighting the lure's design and start working with it. This leads us to the number one mistake, the aggressive long rip. Imagine you see a fish on your flasher. Your heart starts pumping, and your first instinct is to rip that rod tip 2 or 3 feet in the air to get the fish's attention. You think a big, frantic action will trigger a strike. In reality, you're doing the exact opposite. You're scaring the fish. That violent, unnatural upward tear doesn't look like a dying baitfish. It looks like something panicking and fleeing. Worse, a long, powerful rip completely kills the lure's signature glide. It sends the jig shooting straight up, and then it often plummets straight back down, tangled on its own line. You've effectively turned a sophisticated glider into a simple lead weight. That's not what you paid for, and it's certainly not what the fish are looking for. So, let's redefine the proper upward motion. Stop thinking of it as a jig or a rip. Instead, think of it as a pop. The correct movement is a short, crisp lift of the rod tip. We're talking 6 to 12 inches max. It's a flick of the wrist, not a full arm movement. The goal is to give the lure just enough upward momentum to kick it out to the side and start its glide. Picture this. You're not trying to launch it into orbit. You are simply trying to pop it off the ground so it can fly. A sharp, controlled pop engages the fins instantly and sends the lure on its intended path. You let the lure's design do all the heavy lifting. A soft, lazy lift will cause it to wallow, and a hard, faster rip will cause it to tumble. The magic is in that crisp, short-range pop. Now for the most important part of the entire presentation, the sacred pause. After you've popped the lure, what do? The answer for most struggling anglers is not enough. They're too impatient. They pop it, let it fall for a second, and then pop it again, desperate to keep the action going. This is a fatal flaw. 90% if not more of your strikes on a balanced jig will happen during the pause, as the lure is silently gliding back to the center point below your hole. This is when it looks most vulnerable. It's imitating a dying, fluttering baitfish, an easy meal that a predator can't resist. By immediately jigging again, you are literally pulling the lure away from the fish right at the moment it was about to commit. You have to force yourself to do nothing. Let it hang. The next logical question is, how long is the perfect pause? The honest answer is, it's almost always longer than you're comfortable with. When you're on the ice and the bite is slow, every second feels like a minute. Your instinct is to keep moving, to keep trying something. But you must resist that urge. A good starting point is to count to 3 in your head after the lure has settled. 1, 1,000. 2, 1,000. 3, 1,000. If that doesn't work, extend it to 5. On days with very negative or lethargic fish, you might need to pause for 10 seconds or even longer. The lure will be completely still at the bottom of its glide, and that's when a tentative walleye will finally move in to inhale it. Patience isn't just a virtue in this style of fishing, it is the single most critical component of the technique. While you're practicing that patience, you need to learn to read your line. Too many ice fishermen are rod tip watchers. They wait for the rod to double over before they set the hook. With a balance jig, especially on the fall, the bite is often much more subtle. As the lure is gliding, you should be paying intense attention to your fishing line right where it enters the water. The strike often won't be a big thump. Instead, you'll see a tiny, almost imperceptible tick in the line as a fish grabs it on the way down. Or you might see the line suddenly go slack, or you'll see it jump just slightly to the side. These are all signs that a fish has it. If you're waiting to feel the bite in the rod handle, you have already missed the majority of your opportunities. Your eyes are a far better strike detector than your hands. Your equipment plays a huge role in this, which brings us to the wrong rod action. Many anglers use one generic ice rod for everything. Often it's a stiff, heavy action rod that they'd use for a big slab spoon. This is a huge mistake for balanced jig fishing. A rod that's too stiff acts like a dead piece of wood. It absorbs all the subtlety and kills the lure's action. You can't impart that short, crisp pop with a broomstick. You need a rod with a fast, sensitive tip that allows you to feel the lure working and detect those subtle bites, but it also needs enough backbone in the lower section to drive the hooks home. Think of it this way. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer for brain surgery. Using a heavy, clumsy rod to present a finesse lure like a balance jig is just as ineffective. Match your rod to the lure's intended action. Let's talk about your line, because it might be your biggest enemy, specifically heavy or thick line. Many ice anglers, especially those targeting walleye, spool up with 8, 10 or even 12-pound monofilament or thick fluorocarbon. While that might be fine for dead sticking a big shiner, it's a death sentence for a balanced jig's glide. The thick diameter of the line creates significant water resistance. It acts like a parachute, slowing the lure's fall and robbing it of its natural sweeping glide. The lure can't move freely because it's essentially dragging an anchor behind it. For most balanced jig applications, especially with smaller to medium-sized lures, you should be using a much lighter line, like 4 to 6 pound test. The thinner diameter cuts through the water, allowing the jig to swim and glide exactly as its designers intended. There's a second way your line is betraying you: line twist. This is a subtle, insidious problem that most anglers completely ignore. Every time you retrieve your lure, especially with a spinning reel, you can introduce a small amount of twist into the line. Over the course of a day, this twist builds up. When you drop your balance jig down the hole, that twisted line will try to uncoil. What does this do to your lure? It forces it to spin in tight little circles instead of gliding out in a wide arc. A spinning lure looks completely unnatural and will repel fish. An easy way to check for this is to drop your lure into the hole and watch it. If it's spinning like a top, you have a line twist problem. Let out a bunch of line and let it untwist. Or better yet, use a high quality ball bearing swivel a foot or two above your lure to prevent it in the first place. Now let's look at the absolute smallest detail that can make the biggest difference: your knot. How are you tying the balance jig to your line? The vast majority of fishermen use a standard cinched down knot, like an improved clinch knot. They pull it tight right against the eyelet of the lure. This effectively locks the lure in place. It strangles its ability to move freely. For a balanced jig to achieve its maximum gliding and pivoting action, it needs a point of articulation. The solution is simple. Use a loop knot. A Rapala knot or a simple surgeon's loop creates a small, open loop for the lure to swing on. This freedom of movement is non-negotiable. It allows the lure to pivot, glide, and rock at the bottom of the fall in a much more natural way. Ditching your old cinch knot for a loop knot can single-handedly double your bites. This brings us to the great snap swivel debate. Many anglers love the convenience of a snap swivel. It lets them change lures quickly without retying. But when it comes to balance jigs, that convenience comes at a steep price. First, the snap swivel adds weight, and it's weight in the wrong place. It can disrupt the lure's carefully engineered center of gravity, causing it to hang nose down or otherwise unnaturally. Second, even the smallest snap can be bulky and can impede the lure's action, much like a tight cinch knot does. While a high-quality tiny snap swivel is better than nothing, the absolute best connection is tying direct to your line with a loop knot. It provides the most freedom of movement and the most natural presentation. If you're serious about mastering this lure, take the extra 30 seconds and retie. Let's talk about what your electronics, your flasher or your sonar, are telling you. If you are marking fish that come screaming in towards your lure, maybe they rise up 5 feet to inspect it, and then they turn around and leave. What does that mean? Most people think the fish just wasn't interested. Wrong. It means the fish was very interested, but something you did at the last second spooked it. This is the classic sign of being too aggressive. The fish was attracted by the motion, but when it got close, your frantic ripping and jigging looked unnatural and dangerous. The solution here is to do less. When you see that fish coming in hot, stop jigging. Let the lure hang perfectly still. Let it do its slow glide. That sudden change from action to inaction is often the final trigger that a curious fish needs to commit. Now, let's look at the opposite scenario on your flasher. You see a fish mark appear below your lure, and it just sits there. It doesn't move up, it doesn't move down, it just holds its position a foot or two beneath your jig. This is a classic sign of a neutral or negative fish. It's lethargic. It's not in an aggressive feeding mood. Trying to trigger this fish with a big 6-inch pop and a glide is a waste of time. It doesn't have the energy or the motivation to chase. For these fish, you need to scale everything back. Use a much smaller lift, maybe just an inch or two, and a much longer pause. You're not trying to imitate a fleeing minnow anymore. You're trying to imitate one that is barely alive, an effortless meal. Sometimes the best move is no move at all, which leads us to our next technique. When faced with those neutral, non-committal fish, you need to employ the quiver technique. After your lure has completed its glide and has settled back to center, instead of popping it again, you do something much more subtle. Simply apply light pressure to your rod blank and make the tip tremble. You're not lifting the lure off the bottom, you are just shaking it in place. This tiny vibrating motion makes the plastic fins on the balance jig quiver and shake. It makes the whole lure look like it's breathing, just barely clinging to life. For a fish that's staring at your lure from a foot away, this micro movement can be absolutely irresistible. It's a sign of ultimate vulnerability. It takes incredible patience and focus, but mastering the quiver is what separates the good anglers from the great ones on tough days. Sometimes the problem isn't your jigging cadence, it's that you haven't done enough to get the fish's attention in the first place. This is where pounding bottom comes in. This is especially effective on soft bottom areas made of sand or silt. Let your balanced jig fall all the way to the bottom, and then pop it just hard enough to lift it a few inches, and let it slam back down. Do this 3 or 4 times. This disturbance kicks up a cloud of silt and debris. To nearby perch or walleye, this silt cloud signals that something is happening. It could be a crawfish digging, or a minnow feeding on invertebrates. It's a dinner bell. After you've created that commotion, lift your lure a foot or two off the bottom and begin your normal pop and glide sequence. You've now drawn them in with the sound and sight of the silt cloud. A common but easily fixed error is simply fishing too high in the water column. Anglers often drop their lure down, see that they are in say 20 feet of water, and start jigging at the 10-foot mark. They figure they are splitting the difference, but most of the predator fish we target, especially walleye and jumbo perch, are relating to the bottom. They use the bottom for camouflage, and they hunt by looking up. They expect their prey to be within a few feet of the substrate. While they might be willing to chase a lure 4 or 5 feet up, they are very unlikely to travel 10 feet into open water for a meal, unless they are extremely aggressive. Always start your jigging sequence within 1 to 2 feet of the bottom. That is the primary strike zone. Work that zone thoroughly before you even think about moving higher. We hear the phrase match the hatch all the time, and most anglers think it just means picking a lure color that looks like the local bait fish. But it's so much more than that. You need to match the action of the hatch. Observe the bait fish on your camera or sonar. Are they healthy and darting around erratically? If so, a quicker pop and glide sequence might work. Or are they lethargic because of the cold water, barely moving and slowly dying? In that case, your presentation needs to be dead slow, with long pauses and subtle quivers. You are an actor, and the lure is your puppet. Your job is to make that puppet's performance believable to the audience of fish below. Stop thinking about color for a minute and start thinking about choreography. Are you directing a high-speed action scene or a slow dramatic death? Let's consider the sound factor. Many popular balance jigs are filled with rattles. Those little beads are designed to create sound, which can attract fish from a distance. However, the way you jig the lure drastically changes the sound it produces. A hard, violent rip creates a loud, alarming crash sound underwater. A gentle, crisp pop creates a much more subtle clink or tick sound. Which one do you think sounds more like a natural bait fish and less like a piece of falling hardware? On highly pressured bodies of water, fish can become conditioned to avoid loud, unnatural noises. By softening your jigging stroke, you're not only perfecting the lure's glide, you're also refining its acoustic profile to be more subtle and enticing. Sometimes a quieter approach is the deadliest approach. Here's an advanced concept most anglers never even consider: underwater current. You might think the water under the ice is perfectly still, but that's rarely the case, especially on larger lakes or river systems. Even a very slight current can have a dramatic effect on your balance jig's glide. It can push against the lure, shortening its glide in one direction and unnaturally extending it in the other. It can prevent the lure from returning to center. The key is to use the current to your advantage. Try to position yourself so that your pop sends the lure gliding across the current or with it, allowing it to sweep naturally. You may have to drill multiple holes around a spot to find the perfect angle where the lure's action looks most natural. Ignoring current is like trying to fly a kite in a vacuum. Finally, we have to talk about the biggest mistake of all, and it has nothing to do with your gear or your technique. It's the confidence crash. Here's the scenario. You drill a hole, you drop down your balance jig, and you work it for 10 minutes. Nothing happens. Your confidence plummets. You start to doubt the lure, the spot, everything. So you reel up and switch to your old reliable spoon. You never gave the balance jig a real chance to work. The angler 50 feet away who's catching fish, he's probably been patiently executing the same subtle pop and pause routine for the last 45 minutes. He has confidence in the system. He knows that it's a waiting game. If you constantly switch lures every 10 minutes, you'll never settle in and master any of them, especially a finesse presentation like this one. Trust the process. So, as you can see, it's almost never about the lure. It's not the color and it's not the brand. It's the pause that's too short. It's the line that's too thick. It's the knot that's choking the action. It's the rod that's too stiff. And it's the mindset that's too impatient. But if you take away only one thing from this video, let it be this: you have been working the lure when you should be letting the lure work for you. Your job is simply to pop it and then get out of its way. That truly is the secret. Understanding this fundamentally changes your entire approach to ice fishing. It shifts your focus from aggressive, constant action to subtle, deliberate presentation and careful observation. You'll start fishing with your eyes on the line and your brain, not just with your arm. Thank you so much for watching. If this video gave you that aha the moment, do me a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more no-nonsense fishing tips that actually work. Now I have to ask you all a serious question. What's the longest you have ever forced yourself to wait during the pause before getting a bite? Drop your personal record in the comments below. I want to see who has the most patience.